Chapter 1063. Speaking up to this point, Grandma Yen shook her head with a bitter expression and said, "However, it's precisely because the few ancient gods held the power to become gods that they provoked the demon god. He single-handedly turned the entire divine world into a bloodbath, and it almost fell apart and couldn't be resolved." Although they were shocked by the fierceness of the demon god, they couldn't help but admire him. He was indeed a peerless genius. He single-handedly turned the entire divine realm upside down. What kind of demeanor was that? The demon god made such a big movement in the divine realm. Could it be that he wanted to share the power to become gods with the few ancient gods? Yu Qianqiu wondered. After all, people rarely went on a killing spree if there was no conflict of interest.
No.
It's not because of this. Granny Yen let out a long sigh and said, "Deities are also made by humans. No matter how high the cultivation of a god is, he is still a human. Humans have selfish thoughts. The few ancient gods held the power to become gods. In addition, after so many years of reproduction, their respective races could be said to have many descendants. Since they had selfish thoughts, they would naturally fight for the interests of their own race. At least, they would be biased towards their own descendants. Therefore, for many years, whenever a new deity position was formed in the world, most of it would be divided by the few ancient gods. It was very difficult for others to gain anything." As she spoke, she raised her hand and pointed to Taishu Zheng's tombstone and said, "Taishu Zheng, the demon god, and little Xian's mother." The tragedy between the three of them began. It was also because of this that the demon god trampled on all living beings in the divine realm. When these three people were placed together, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but exclaim. He thought of something and said, "Could it be that these three people are? I heard that there were three peerless geniuses in the lower realm in that era. They were the ancestor of all demons, Taishu Zheng, the demon god Yi, and a woman called Ming. It seems that there is a story between the three of them. Since Taishu Zheng is Taishu Xian's father, could it be that the woman called Ming is Taishu Xian's mother?" As soon as he said this, Granny Yen immediately looked at him in surprise. She nodded and praised. No wonder a minor immortal could have such a large network in the three realms. You even know such a secret. Not bad. Little Xian's mother was indeed Ming. But as far as I know, Ming rarely showed up in the lower realm, and she was very low-key. She had never done anything that would make her famous. The number of people who knew of her existence could be counted with one's fingers. You actually know of her? This old woman has to look at you in a different light. Song Yun Xian and Xin Yu were also shocked. They did not expect Yu Qianqiu to know such a secret. Song Yun Xian looked at Yu Qianqiu with a bewildered gaze. "Granny is too kind. I just happened to hear someone talking about it." After some modesty, Yu Qianqiu humbly asked, "I heard that the three of them had a conflict because of fighting over the godhood. This matter has to start from the few ancient gods." Granny Yen recalled the past and said, "Originally, there were only two realms, the netherworld and the current human world. At that time, there were not as many living beings in the world as there are now. All kinds of living beings mixed together. Among them, there were 12 great gods with profound cultivation, who are now known as the ancient gods. Later, as all kinds of living beings multiplied, the human world could no longer accommodate them and became more and more crowded. Therefore, the 12 ancient gods opened up 71 human worlds for all living beings to multiply and live in. Thus, there were 72 worlds in the human world. Finally, it's not crowded anymore. Then, one of the 12 ancient gods suggested that each person rules 6 realms. This method of equal distribution was agreed upon by the majority. However, the war god of the 12 ancient gods felt that it was unreasonable to divide the realms equally. They should divide the realms according to their strength. Due to his unfathomable strength, most people dare not speak out even if they are angry. Moreover, the 2 experts among the 12 ancient gods who can suppress the war god are not here. The publicly acknowledged number 1 expert, Dao, is elusive, appearing and disappearing from time to time. No one has seen him face to face. Among the 12 ancient gods, the great coiling dragon god and the great phoenix god only follow Tao's orders. Before receiving Tao's decree, they will not express any opinion on this matter. The other indignant ancient gods could only find another great god who could suppress the war god, Yi, to uphold justice. However, Yi's whereabouts were also uncertain. He often traveled in the vast sea of stars in the universe. Just when the war god was about to make a mess, Yi suddenly returned from the vast universe. The other ancient gods were overjoyed and looked for him to uphold justice. Therefore, Yi found the war god and persuaded him to keep the peace. In the end, the war god refused to accept his mediation. As expected, the two of them fought. They fought several times. The war god was no match for Yi. In his anger, he ignited the 2 souls and 7 spirits of his 3 souls and 7 spirits, wanting to perish together with everyone. Yi had no choice but to draw the supreme god bow and attach his life spirit to it. The other 2 souls and 7 spirits attached to the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. He shot 9 arrows in a row and sealed the ignited 2 souls and 7 spirits of the war god in 9 different time and space. An unprecedented battle that shocked the ancient gods ended just like that. And the 2 ancient gods fell apart just like that. Yu Qianqiu and the others listened with rapt attention. In fact, they had more or less heard of this legendary battle. It was just that too much time had passed, and there were many different versions of it. This was the first time they had heard of such a detailed story, and they couldn't help but sigh with emotion. TSK, TSK. A godly bow and arrow that could even seal a war god. Its power is truly extraordinary. I wonder where these godly weapons ended up in the end? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked. He was thinking that if he could gather the 10,000 swords of the demon monarch of swords into one heaven and earth splitting arrow, and then find the supreme god bow, he should be able to deal with the demon monarch. It would be even better if he could kill the demon monarch with 1 arrow. Divine weapons can only be obtained by those who are fated. Grandma Yen shook her head and said, "There's no need to even think about the 9 heaven and earth splitting arrows. Our time and space is the main battlefield of the battle back then. The 9 divine arrows have already traveled to 9 other time and space. Unless someone's cultivation has reached the realm of the great god Yi and can travel to different time and space, how can they be found?" Hearing this, Songyun Xin and Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at each other. Their eyes were filled with suspicion because they both knew that the 10,000 flying swords in the hands of the demon monarch of swords were the legendary great god Yi's heaven and earth splitting arrow. Could it be that the legend was wrong? Or was it that the demon monarch of swords didn't have the heaven and earth splitting arrow at all? Otherwise, how could the divine arrow that had traveled to 9 other time and space return? Grandma Yen continued, "However, the supreme god Bao is still in our time and space. Moreover, it's very likely that it's lying dormant in one of the 72 worlds in the human world. It's just that even the ancient gods couldn't find it. We don't know where it has gone." "What happened after that?" Yu Qianqiu asked while the iron was hot. He still had to look for Bai Chongqun and didn't have time to waste here. Naturally, it was better to get to the bottom of things as soon as possible. Grandma Yen didn't hide it from him. She tilted her head to look at the tomb of the moon god and sighed. After that war, the 72 worlds that were originally divided by 12 people became 10 people. Naturally, they couldn't even share it even if they wanted to. In the end, they had to go to war again. At this time, the great phoenix god brought the decree of Tao. He asked them to stop fighting and give up the 72 worlds in the human world to all living beings. He asked the gods to open up a new world to live in and restricted them to not easily step into the human world in the future. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he couldn't help but ask, "I heard that there's an illusory god in the god realm. The dragons and phoenixes are his messengers. Is it this Tao? You even know about the god realm. It seems that you're really knowledgeable." Grandma Yen nodded in appreciation and said, "That's right. There's an illusory god in the god realm, which is the Tao that I mentioned just now. The dragons and phoenixes are willing to be his messengers. Will the gods really listen to him obediently and give up the 72 worlds that have already been opened up? Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. Of course not. You should know that even if it's an ancient god, it's not easy to open up a world. The energy required is also abnormally huge. Grandma Yen suddenly sneered and said, at that time, there were people who refused to do so. In the end, the coiling dragon god brazenly made a move and fought with the ancient god. In the end, he killed the ancient god. Everyone immediately swallowed their complaints and listened to him obediently. You should know that apart from the coiling dragon god, there was also the great phoenix god who was eyeing them covetously. Moreover, the two of them even had the support of Tao, who dared to say anything. Therefore, the gods were forced to open up a world together. This world was much bigger than the 72 worlds combined. It is now the celestial world in the lower realm. However, not long after, Tao forced everyone to open up the god realm again and allowed the gods to migrate to the god realm. He also established the rule that mortals could ascend to the celestial world if they succeeded in their cultivation, and immortals could ascend to the god realm if they succeeded in their cultivation. Tao also allowed the 6 ancient gods, apart from the coiling dragon god and the great phoenix god, to hold the power to confer and become gods. He himself remained illusory and did not participate in these matters. The 6 ancient gods who obtained such power had the opportunity to establish their own supreme status. Finally, they no longer had any complaints about Tao. Actually, everyone knows the original intention of Tao when he established this ascension system. It was nothing more than to separate mortals, immortals, and gods so that everyone could do their own thing. Otherwise, the mortals with the weakest strength would forever be deprived of all the rights to live by the strong. There would be no chance for them to make a comeback at all. However, people were greedy. Even if they had a high and mighty position, they still could not be satisfied. The 6 ancient gods used the power in their hands to constantly expand their strength. They all wanted to seize the supreme power of life and death that looked down on everything. Chapter 1064. A disdainful sneer appeared on Granny Yan's face as she said, every time a divine splendor descends from the conferred god mountain in the extreme region of heaven-bearing, it means that someone in the world has attained the qualifications to be conferred as a god. The 6 ancient gods should summon the corresponding person to the conferred god mountain and absorb the divine splendor that descends from the sky to rapidly increase their cultivation and consolidate their position as gods. However, the 6 ancient gods who control the conferred god mountain don't follow the arrangement of the Tao. Every time a powerful divine light descends, it means that the person who is conferred as a god will have extraordinary achievements in the future once he absorbs such a powerful divine light. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said with slight surprise, could it be that the 6 ancient gods are worried that someone will surpass them and do something to the divine light? Songyin Xin and Ji looked at each other in shock. They didn't expect to hear such a secret of the god realm. Just based on this secret, Songyin Xin felt that it was worth it to take the risk with Yu Qianqiu this time. Granny Yen snorted coldly. One of the important reasons is that they are worried about being surpassed by the younger generation. What's more despicable is that they actually take the divine light for themselves. Every time a powerful divine light descends, the 6 ancient gods won't summon the person who is supposed to be conferred as a god to absorb the divine light that belongs to him. Instead, they quietly arrange for their descendants to come to the conferred god mountain to absorb the divine light and create an expert that belongs to their own tribe. ****. They're really despicable. Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. His expression twitched as he clicked his tongue. It seems like there are bastards who abuse their power for personal gain everywhere. They take all the benefits that belong to others. What about others? Others? Whether others live or die is not something they consider at all. Granny Yen snorted and said with a sarcastic expression, the 6 of them have already agreed that if the divine light belongs to one of their 6 tribes, then the other 5 tribes have no right to share it. If it doesn't belong to any one of the 6 tribes, Then the 6 tribes will each choose one person from their tribe to come to the conferred God Mountain to share the divine light. Of course, if the divine light is pitifully small, it won't be able to forge a divine body if it is shared by 6 disciples of the 6 tribes. Under such circumstances, the 6 ancient gods will find the corresponding person from the lower realm to absorb it. Damn it! No matter how small a mosquito is, it's still meat. Are the 6 ancient gods really willing to give it up? Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but mock. But it's a pity that the 2 of them stayed in the lower realm and didn't know anything about the god realm. As their divine essence was too powerful, the divine essence that belonged to them had naturally been divided by the tribes of the 6 ancient gods. Zheng and Yi were originally friends. Their cultivation was rare in the world. Although the latter was a little stronger than the former, the difference was not too big. It's funny that the 2 of them didn't know anything about the god realm. They still appreciated each other and became good friends, working together to pursue the path to become a god. Later on, the 2 of them met Ming. Ming was a rare beauty in the world, and her cultivation was also extraordinary. It made the 2 of them fall in love with Ming at first sight. And Ming was also amazed by their high cultivation and was very happy to become friends with them. As the saying goes, time breeds love. Not only did the 2 men fall in love with Ming, even Ming also developed feelings for Zheng. Naturally, the 2 of them got together. However, the 2 of them had scruples about Ye's feelings and had been secretly working together. On the surface, they maintained their previous relationship and were ready to find the right opportunity to tell Yi. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but ask, since the cultivation of Yi is higher than that of Zheng, why did Ming choose Zheng and not Yi? I also asked Ming this question, but Ming said that it's because Ye's character is too clear about love and hate. If he likes something, then he likes it. If he doesn't like it, then he doesn't like it. It can even be described as extreme. In fact, Yi originally had a wife and a child. But after meeting Ming, Yi brazenly killed his wife in front of Ming to show his determination to Ming. Granny Yan smiled bitterly and said, Ming was frightened at that time. I didn't expect Yi to be so cruel. Think about it. How could Ming be with Yi? If Yi falls in love with another woman in the future, wouldn't she follow in the footsteps of Ye's ex-wife? Lunatic. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and muttered to himself. He couldn't help but think of Bai Changchun, who abandoned his family and son. He wondered if all the real experts had similar tendencies. Granny Yan continued. Yi didn't know about the other couple. He felt that it wasn't a good idea for the 3 of them to continue like this. There was only one Ming, and in the end, she could only be with one man. So, he secretly looked for Zheng and proposed a solution. He asked for them to cultivate in seclusion together. Whoever obtained the qualification to ascend to godhood first would give up the competition for Ming. In the face of such a ridiculous method, Justice can completely reject it because Dark has already secretly cooperated with him. At the very least, Dark has the right to make her own choice. He only whispered in her ear that if he didn't guess wrongly, once the 2 of them absorbed the 2 beams of divine essence, they would definitely be persecuted after going through this process. To Ming's surprise, Night brought her under the 2 rays of divine splendor and used the heaven-defying, demonic reversal technique to help Ming absorb the 2 rays of divine splendor into her body. After that, Night told Ming that if you really hate me that much, then you should live well and save your life to take revenge on me. Ming didn't understand what Night meant when Night slapped her stomach and killed the fetus in her stomach. Night said to the grief-stricken Ming again, I'm sorry. I had no choice but to do this. I didn't have the confidence to escape with you. Only by letting them know that you and I are complete opposites can you have a chance to live. Remember, if you want to take revenge for Zheng and the dead fetus in your stomach, then you must live well. When they heard this, all of them were moved and couldn't help but look at each other. The demonic god, Night, was neither good nor evil. It was hard to tell if he was a good person or a bad person. It even made the three of them feel suffocated. Night really escaped from the sealed god's forbidden land? Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but ask. If he didn't escape, how could the current demonic god exist? Granny Yen nodded indifferently and said, "Indeed, he single-handedly fought his way out of the sealed god's forbidden land and escaped." The guards outside the forbidden land didn't expect to encounter such a ferocious desperado. However, at that time, Night's cultivation was not high enough to move unhindered in the immortal world. Immediately, there were countless experts who chased after him. One can well imagine what happened to him. Although he killed many of those who chased after him, he was forced to break all 4 of his limbs along the way. He had to use the blood escape art for times before he was able to escape. It could be said to be extremely tragic. Those who saw it with their own eyes were all shocked. Later on, when they recalled it, they would still be moved. However, his ability was indeed extraordinary. I can't help but admire him. So many people couldn't stop him, and he escaped in the end. After that, the 6 clans led by the 6 ancient gods almost searched the entire divine world, but they couldn't find his hiding place. They also didn't know where he was hiding. Fortunately, under his ruthless actions, he made the right bet. Ming really managed to keep her life. Chapter 1066. Actually, there's another important reason why I was able to stay alive. It's because Night made too much noise and attracted the attention of the Dragon Tribe and the Phoenix Tribe. The people of the 6 tribes didn't do anything to her because they were afraid of her. They even gave her the title of God of the Underworld. But it's impossible for her to be treated well. Not only did she not get a territory, she didn't even get a place to live. Granny Yen turned around and pointed at the grave on the other side. Although my old man has been conferred the title of Moon God, he's actually not well received in the tribe. Ming was randomly assigned to stay here with me and my wife, and he'll suffer the disdain of others together with us. Yu Qianzhou was surprised and said, "You are also from the 6 tribes of the realm of gods." "Yes. We are the descendants of the ancient god of light." When Granny Yen said this, a sarcastic expression flashed across her face. It seemed that she didn't want to have too much to do with that tribe. She changed the topic and continued. "After dark came here, we were all ignored and looked down upon. Maybe it's because we share the same fate. We got along very well. After that, Dark lived in seclusion and almost didn't show up in the outside world. She used a meditation method to transform the dead fetus in her belly into a ghost fetus and continued to be pregnant. Although the fetus grew up very slowly, it was indeed a kind of magical technique. The 3 looked at each other and didn't expect such a magical thing. Needless to say, they knew that the ghost fetus in Dark's belly was Taishu Xian, the current underworld saintess. This must be the strange birth of Taishu Xian, who was born with the underworld body that Granny Yen mentioned before. Time flies. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years have passed. Little Xian, who was born with the underworld body, was finally born. It was a happy event in the Cold Moon Palace. However, the birth of Xianlas seemed to herald the arrival of a bloody storm in the god realm. When Xianlas was just able to walk, Ming, who had never left the Moon Palace, took Xianlas out of the Moon Palace for the first time for her daughter's sake. She wanted to let Xianlas experience the outside world. At that time, I accompanied her. However, as soon as I went out, I got into big trouble because of Dark's beauty. In a beautiful place, Ming saw that there were few people around, so she removed the veil that covered her face so that it would be easier for her to play with her daughter, who knew that she would bump into the descendant of the ancient light god, Qingyang, passing by with a group of people. When Qingyang first saw Ming's appearance, he was stunned. He actually said that he wanted Ming to be his concubine. We obviously wouldn't agree. We also knew that we weren't their match, so we could only run for our lives. Night looked at the surging clouds and said that his presence had already alarmed quite a few experts. Someone was hurrying over, so he told us to retreat for now. Meanwhile, he wanted to bathe the god world in blood for revenge from 1,000 years ago. Back then, I was so shocked by his demonic flames that I did not even dare to breathe loudly. Ming had no intention of saying anything else to him, so we quickly left. However, not long after we left, we suddenly heard Knight's voice ripple through the god world. His tone was abnormally domineering and cold. I, Demon God Knight, have returned. All those who hunted me 1,000 years ago will die. All those who hunted me 1,000 years ago will be wiped out. From today onwards, I will bathe the entire god world in blood. From today onwards, the god world will no longer need the 6 great races. The 6 ancient gods will all die. They will use their lives to pay for your years of greed. From today onwards, I, Demon God Knight, will put an end to everything. Light, your descendant Qingyang is begging for mercy under my feet. Why are you still cowardly and cowardly? Could it be that you don't dare to come out and fight me? When Yu Qianqiu and the others heard this, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. This demon god's tone was a little too arrogant. He actually wanted to go against the 6 great races, led by the 6 ancient gods. He even said that he wanted to bathe the entire god world in blood. He was too arrogant. Knight's undisguised and deliberate words immediately shocked the entire god realm, and the curtains of a bloody battle were drawn. After that, we found out that the current knight was no longer the same as before. His demonic arts could be said to be omnipotent. He waited for the experts of the god world to gather at the place where he saved us. He did not run or avoid the battle. In that battle, he slaughtered hundreds of thousands of people from the 6 clans. Their corpses piled up like a mountain. He stood at the peak of that mountain of corpses and sea of blood. Under his feet, there was Qingyang, who was neither human nor ghost, screaming miserably day in and day out. Yu Qianqiu and the others were speechless. They imagined the scene at that time. How tall would it be when the corpses of hundreds of thousands of people were piled up? In the end, the experts of the 6 clans were killed to the point that they did not dare to come close. Knight no longer needed anyone to confer him the title of Demon God. Just the fact that he stood at the peak of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood without anyone daring to touch him was enough to make his name resound throughout the god world. Just as he said, no one was qualified to confer him the title of God. The 6 ancient gods never thought that the current knight would actually be so ferocious. Unless they personally took action, no one would be able to deal with this great evil. In the end, the ancient god, Light, was the first to lose his cool. Regardless of whether he had feelings for Qingyang or not, Qingyang was still his descendant. Now that he was being trampled by Night day and night, it was no different from a slap to his face. He had no choice but to save him. The ancient god of Light finally took action. Originally, everyone thought that Night was dead for sure this time, but in the end, everyone's jaws dropped. The ancient god of Light was actually forced to flee by night and luckily managed to escape with his life. Night left the mountain of corpses and sea of blood and chased after the ancient god of Light. Although he managed to escape, he barged into the territory of the ancient god of Light. He killed everyone on sight, regardless of gender or age. He massacred the descendants of the ancient god of Light, but the ancient god of Light did not dare to show himself to protect his own. With that, the title of Demon God stood at the peak of the god world. With that, the 6 ancient gods could no longer sit still. They all regretted provoking this great evil. If the demon god only dealt with the Light clan, the others might have been intimidated by the demon god's methods and ignored him. However, the demon god had already spread the word that he wanted to deal with everyone in the 6 ancient gods. He wanted to massacre them all. With the cooperation of the ancient god of Light, the scene of the 6 ancient gods working together to fight the enemy appeared for the first time. They trapped the demon god, who was wantonly slaughtering people in the god world. The demon god did not run or hide, and took the battle head-on. A fierce battle that changed the color of the sky and made the sun and moon lose their light made the entire god world tremble. Yu Qianqiu swallowed with difficulty. His Adam's apple vibrated as he said, "What happened in the end?" Song Yun Xian and Shunyu were confused. Of the 6 ancient gods, 2 were killed and 4 were injured. The demon god himself was also seriously injured. However, the remaining 4 ancient gods, including the ancient god of light, were chased by the demon god all over the god world. It seemed like the demon god would not stop until he killed them. Wherever he went, he would kill anyone he saw. His ferocity was simply hair-raising. In the end, the 4 ancient gods who could no longer fight were forced to flee into the territories of the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god respectively to seek help. I don't know if the 2 ancient gods who never participated in any battles helped them. However, after the demon god chased them into the territories of the 2 ancient gods, no one knew what was happening inside. When the demon god came out again, the 4 ancient gods also came out with their tails between their legs. The 5 of them went their separate ways and seemed to have resolved the battle between them. Therefore, some people guessed that the coiling dragon god and the phoenix god joined forces with the 4 ancient gods to suppress the demon god. Others said that it was the mysterious Tao who resolved the battle between the 5 of them. However, none of the people involved were willing to mention this matter. In short, no matter what the truth is, the demon god had already become the #1 expert in the god world in everyone's hearts by defeating 6 ancient gods alone. Chapter 1067. This result made the 3 of them sigh endlessly. Yu Qianqiu even felt his scalp go numb. He couldn't help but think of the pair of cold and ruthless eyes he saw in the sky above the Lingfang Valley. When he thought that Yan Juexing had such a powerful person behind him, he immediately felt extremely pressured. He didn't know whether it would be a blessing or a disaster in the end. How did it end up like this? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the graves on both sides, especially the grave of the moon god, and asked, "I can understand that Taishu Jing died a long time ago. Could it be that the moon god also participated in the battle against the demon god?" A miserable look flashed across Grandma Yan's face. She shook her head and said, "After the demon god defeated the 6 ancient gods, he came to the moon palace to look for Dark. When he heard the babbling Xian girl calling, 'Dark, mother,' his expression changed drastically. He didn't expect that Dark could make a dead fetus become a ghost fetus. He thought that it was a child that Dark had with another man. So, he immediately questioned Dark whose child was it. In order to anger him, Dark admitted that it was a child that she had with another man. Of course, she was also afraid that he wouldn't let go of the child after hearing that it was Zheng's daughter. The demon god knight was so angry that he laughed. He angrily scolded Dark for being shameless and Zheng, dying for her. Then he asked which man's bastard child was it. Seeing that Dark didn't answer, his eyes immediately locked on the man standing beside her, who was my husband, the moon god. He thought that my husband was the man who had an affair with Dark. In a rage, he attacked. Just think, how could my husband be a match for him? He died in his hands unjustly. Even if we wanted to save him, we couldn't do it in time. Until the demon god knight also wanted to kill Xian girl, Dark had no choice but to tell him about Xian girl's identity. If he wanted to kill them, he should kill them both. I don't know why, but after the demon god knight knew that Xian girl was Zheng's daughter, he didn't kill her. He just glanced at Xian girl a few more times before leaving. After that, Dark kept apologizing to me and kept apologizing. Then, the Phoenix clan sent a decree saying that the mausoleum of the god of sin, where only gods were buried, would be opened. Those who died in this disaster could be buried in the mausoleum of the god of sin. When I was disheartened and prepared to stay with my man in the mausoleum of the god of sin forever, Dark came to me with Xian. She entrusted Xian and Taishu Zheng's bodies to me and asked me to bring them to the mausoleum of the god of sin together. She said that she would give her man and my man an explanation. To be honest, I hated her at that time. After all, my man died because of her. After I accepted Xian and Taishu Zheng's corpses, I secretly followed her to see how she was going to explain to her man and my man. In the end, I saw her self-destruct in front of the demon god knight, intending to perish together with the demon god. That earth-shattering bang completely woke me up from my hatred. However, the demon god knight's demonic power was too strong. Dark's self-destruction did not cause any damage to him. After the smoke dissipated, the demon god Night knelt at the place where Dark had self-destructed with a dispirited look. He was bleeding from his 7 apertures and howling endlessly. It was almost unbearable to look at. I wanted to wait for the demon god Night to leave, then take Xian to the place where her mother died for the last time. Then, I would take her away to the mausoleum of the god of sin and never come back. Unexpectedly, the demon god Night knelt there and howled for more than 3 days and 3 nights. I didn't dare to stay any longer. I was afraid that he would cause trouble for Xian when he woke up, so I took her to the mausoleum of the god of sin. It was not until the mausoleum of the god of sin was sealed again that I felt relieved. Then, for so many years, I have been guarding the mausoleum with Xian. Who would have thought that Xian would keep asking me about her parents after she grew up? I wanted to hide it from her for the rest of her life. But one time, after she kept asking me, I thought that she would not be able to leave this place anyway, so I told her everything. However, not even in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that she would predict that there would come a time when the barrier of heavens would be lenient. After that, she left behind a jade archive, saying that she wanted to avenge her parents. Then, she quietly left. I still regret this to this day. After listening to this dispute involving the high and mighty gods, the 3 of them fell silent. Who could say who was right and who was wrong? Even though the demon god was infamous for killing countless innocent people, who could say that he was the only one at fault? Time flew by like a fleeting cloud. The countless joys and sorrows brought about by the dispute between the gods might just be the beginning of a never-ending process. Granny, you don't need to feel guilty. Now, Tai Shu Xian is living a good life in the netherworld. She wants to seek revenge on the demon god. To put it bluntly, I'm afraid that she doesn't even have the chance to come into contact with the demon god. How can she seek revenge? Yu Qianqiu sighed and comforted her. Knowing that these grudges would not affect Bai Suzhen's cultivation of the myriad demons' heart sutra, he felt a lot more at ease. After listening to these grudges that involved the heavenly realm, he also felt that there was no meaning in fighting and killing. But this was a cultivation path that could never be turned back once one set foot in it. Chapter 1068. Seeing that the other party's hair was crooked from anger, the 3 of them looked at each other. They were almost certain that this was Old Man Meng, who was annoyed by the harassment. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said, "May I ask if you are Senior Meng?" Seeing that the other party actually knew who he was, the old man's angry expression eased a little, and he said in a deep voice, "That's me. What's the matter?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he chuckled and said, "We were introduced by Grandma Yan from the north. We heard that Senior Meng encountered some trouble, so Grandma Yan asked us to come and see if there's anything we can help with." Grandma Yan introduced you? Old Man Meng was stunned, and he immediately checked the cultivation of the 3 of them. As a result, the corner of his mouth curled up into a disdainful sneer, as if to say, how could the 3 of them be of any help with their cultivation? He took out a jade talisman, and after entering a spell into it, he crushed the jade talisman into powder. The 3 of them understood that the other party was obviously doubting the authenticity of their identity, and he might even be verifying it with Grandma Yan. The 3 of them could not help but feel lucky that they had a good relationship with Grandma Yan, and it should not ruin their business. After a while, Old Man Meng looked at the 3 of them and nodded slightly. "All right. I'm annoyed by that old thief. The 3 of you can act as hidden sentries at the edge of the all-heavens boundary. When you see him, immediately send me a message, lest I lose sight of him." As he spoke, he took out another 3 jade talismans and flicked them into the hands of the 3 of them. "Sure." Yu Qianqiu put away the jade talismans generously and then asked with a trace of suspicion, "I heard from Grandma Yan that person wants to rob the tomb of the god of sin guarded by Senior. May I ask, Senior, why does he want to rob the tomb? Could it be that there are some treasures hidden in the tomb?" At the mention of this, Old Man Meng's face suddenly collapsed, and he said with a hideous expression, "I've met a madman. At first, I thought he wanted to rob the tomb, but later on, I understood that he was using me to practice and improve his cultivation. Every time I chased him away, I found that his cultivation had increased a little when I fought him again. The speed at which his cultivation increased was monstrous. If this continues, I'll sooner or later be defeated by him. I must seize the opportunity to eliminate him before he becomes powerful, otherwise, I'll definitely be humiliated one day. It's truly infuriating.
Sigh.
It was like old man Bai's style. Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Since Senior knows the reason, why did you still fight with him? If you don't fight with him, he won't have the chance to improve his cultivation." You think I want to fight him? After putting away the flying shuttle, Yu Qianzhou pointed to the left and right and said, "Old Song, find a place to wait on the left. Xinyu, find a place to wait on the right. I'll wait here. When you see him, just bring him to me." Songyin Xian was like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He said in shock, "Are you kidding me? Who do you think he is? Do you think the two of us can bring him here just because we say so?" Yu Qianzhou slapped his forehead and smiled. "That's true. He's not as easy to talk to as I am. If you dare to make irresponsible remarks in front of him, you'll definitely suffer. Don't worry. As soon as you see him, immediately shout Yu Qianzhou. When he hears you shout my name, he'll naturally come to you to ask what's going on. There shouldn't be a problem if you bring him here. At the very least, he'll give you time to send a message to me and wait for me to find him. At the very least, if you say my name, at least he won't hurt you." Songyin Xian and Xinyu looked at each other. The former asked suspiciously, "What's the use of saying your name? Is this for real? Are you familiar with him? Don't ask anymore. You'll know the result when the time comes." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, "Go quickly. If you miss the chance to meet him, the immortal emperor's wedding is not far away. We don't have time to delay anymore." After a moment of hesitation, the two of them split up and flew in different directions doubtfully. Yu Qianzhou stood alone in the same spot, rubbing his hands excitedly. He looked up at the big moon in the sky and hoped that he could pull Bai Changchun to the immortal world to support him. 3 days passed by unwittingly in the midst of waiting. In a desolate stone forest, Xinyu carefully hid in it and silently observed his surroundings. Suddenly, he saw the air in the all-heavens boundary ripple like water in front of him. A thin old man in a green robe broke through the rippling air and slid out of the all-heavens boundary like he was standing on the bow of a ship riding the wind and waves. The thin but spirited old man in a green robe floated under the stars and moon, his eyes shining brightly as he looked around. Xinyu immediately guessed that this was the person Yu Qianzhou wanted him to find. However, when he saw this person, his heart couldn't help but tremble. This person's eyes were filled with an indomitable sharpness. That skinny yet sonorous aura made it seem as if this person could rip him apart with just his gaze. His intuition from many years of hiding told him that this person was very dangerous. Therefore, he threw Yu Qianzhou's instructions to the back of his mind and subconsciously wanted to hide first. His head shrank slightly and his body hunched, trying to hide behind the rugged stone pillar. As for what would happen next, he would think about it later. He didn't want to take any life-threatening risks. However, before half of his head could completely hide behind the stone pillar, his clothes lightly brushed against a protruding stone. One of his eyes, which had not hidden behind the stone pillar in time, immediately saw the other party suddenly staring at him. The divine gaze was like electricity piercing one's heart, and the substantial divine sense was like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves, cleanly and neatly sweeping through the terrain of the entire stone forest. Xinyu was shocked. Without saying anything, he wanted to turn around and teleport away. However, just as he was about to turn around, the air around him suddenly froze and a strong pressure pressed down on him on the spot. He couldn't move at all. At this moment, it was difficult to even move a single step with all his cultivation, let alone teleport away. He immediately panicked. It was only at this moment that he thought of using Yu Qianzhou's name to try and save his life. However, His lungs were already being squeezed to the point of bursting, let alone opening his mouth to speak. Even his right to explain had been taken away in an instant. The thin green-robed elder slowly descended from the sky in front of him. He looked him up and down and said indifferently, "Why are you sneaking around here and spying on me?" As soon as the elder asked this, Shinyu immediately found that the strong pressure pressing down on his lungs had disappeared. Although he still couldn't move, at least he could breathe and speak. He didn't say anything to explain and panted as he said, "Yu Qianqiu, Yu Qianqiu. It was Yu Qianqiu who asked me to wait for you here." This thin green-robed elder was none other than Bai Changchun, who was injured by the emperor of the underworld and fled here. Hearing the other party say Yu Qianqiu's name as soon as he opened his mouth, even though he had always been calm, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. The other party had said Yu Qianqiu's name 3 times in a row, so he naturally didn't hear it wrong. But what he couldn't figure out was why Yu Qianqiu would arrange someone here to wait for him. Wasn't this disciple of his too powerful? He didn't know that Yu Qianqiu's magical power couldn't be connected to this place. After frowning and thinking for a while, he shook his hand in his sleeve, and a small handful of silver balls appeared in his palm. He nodded slightly thoughtfully. He thought that Yu Qianqiu had found his whereabouts because of these silver balls, but he couldn't break into the powerful boundary formation of all heavens, so he arranged someone to wait for him here. Could it be that something had happened for him to be in such a hurry to find him? The moment Bai Changchun kept the silver balls in his hand, the strong pressure around him disappeared. Shinyu immediately felt relaxed, and his whole body swayed, as if he was drunk. I want to see how this little demon can enter and exit freely. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw Jiuyu into the all-heaven boundary formation hundreds of meters away with a whoosh. The moment Shinyu was thrown into the all-heavens boundary, his whole body was immediately shrouded in a layer of faint light, which was bright and dazzling in the dark night. Yu Qianqiu was speechless and dug his ears. It was not easy to reason with this old man. Shinyu tumbled in the all-heavens boundary for a while. After he stabilized his body, he quickly flew out. Once he came out, the faint light shrouding his body immediately disappeared. Want to escape? He admitted that he did not have that ability, but he did not dare to approach that old monster in green robe again. The other party was too strong. If he wanted to make a move, he would not be able to resist at all. He was completely like a toy in the other party's hands. Therefore, he stood weakly on the edge of the cliff. He did not dare to leave, nor did he have the guts to approach. It's really amazing. I didn't expect there to be someone here who is not restricted by the all-heavens boundary. Bai Changchun stared at Shinyu in the distance and exclaimed slightly. Then he turned around and asked, "Where is that song something? I want to see how his heartless palace's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style can dominate both the immortal and netherworld realms. I will summon him back now." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He took out a jade talisman and quickly crushed it to send a message. He was looking forward to the scene of Tsongyun Xian being abused. It would take some time for Tsongyun Xian to come back. Yu Qianqiu did not waste time and said respectfully to Bai Changchun, "Master, I heard some news about the devil god from another tomb keeper. Maybe it will be of some use to you in the future." He relayed the story that Grandma Yan told him in detail. He only hoped that his master, who was determined to fight with the devil god, would be careful. That was a real heaven's favored one. If there was a chance to meet him, he must not underestimate him. The #1 expert of the god world, Bai Changchun muttered in a low voice. His green robe fluttered even though there was no wind, but his eyes shone brighter and brighter, revealing the uncontrollable passion in his heart. Yu Qianqiu seemed to feel a raging fire suddenly igniting in his skinny chest, burning fiercely. He massacred the divine realm by himself. Even the 6 ancient gods were not his match. Amazing! Bai Changchun let out a long sigh. The green robe on his body slowly calmed down, just like his emotions. He raised his head and looked at the big moon in the sky. His eyes were shining brightly as he said, It seems that I still have a long way to go. I hope to see the glory of the number one expert in the divine realm as soon as possible. Only then will my life not be in vain. When these words fell into Yu Qianzhou's ears, he couldn't help but worry. If his master really did encounter that terrifying demon god one day, then he didn't dare to think about it any further in fear.
Master.
The current emperor of the underworld should not be your match, right? Yu Qianzhou asked in a low voice. Him? No wonder, he is the emperor who controls the underworld. Bai Changchun's eyes suddenly narrowed slightly. He shook his head lightly and said, When I fought with his underworld generals, I used them as a reference to estimate his strength. In the end, I underestimated the emperor of the underworld's strength. Once we fought, I realized that I was ridiculously wrong. When he attacked, I did not have the strength to resist at all. In just 3 moves, he severely injured me. Especially the speed of his attack. It was simply terrifying. Just 1 move. I was hit by his 1,300 punches in an instant. I was severely injured on the spot. If I had not dispersed most of the power in time, I am afraid that I would have died without a complete corpse. You would not be able to see me standing here today. He is so powerful. Yu Qianzhou cried out involuntarily. He looked behind him and said, Could it be that you are still not his match? I heard from Grandma Yan that old man Meng's cultivation has already reached the early stage of the minor god realm. Even he could not do anything to you. Could it be that the emperor of the underworld is more powerful than him? Previously, I thought that the emperor of the underworld's cultivation was the true late stage of the underworld emperor. But after hearing what you said, I understand that the emperor of the underworld's cultivation has probably long surpassed the late stage of the underworld emperor. According to my judgment, he should be slightly stronger than that old man Meng. But you don't have to worry. As he spoke, Bai Changchun suddenly looked at the all-heavens boundary and said, The all-heavens boundary is a good place for cultivation. I have comprehended a set of magic arts to borrow strength from it. Even if I meet the emperor of the underworld again, although I may not be able to defeat him, it will be impossible for him to seriously injure me like last time. What's more, I feel that my cultivation has reached the critical point of breaking through again. It should not take more than a few days. After fighting a few rounds with old man Meng to clear up my doubts, I think it will be about time. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou slightly lowered his head with a somewhat gloomy expression. He had originally wanted to invite Bai Changchun to the immortal world to solve some problems. After all, who knew if the song he composed would be in line with Emperor Jin's wishes? If Emperor Jin or someone else wanted to deal with him afterwards, he could drag Bai Changchun out to suppress them. In that case, no one would dare to touch him in the future. But now it seemed that Emperor Jin's strength was not weaker than the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. He was not selfish enough to drag his master into danger. Bai Changchun glanced at him. In fact, from the moment he said that Empress Dowager Jin had issued a decree to force him to compose a song, and the date of the wedding was approaching, Bai Changchun already knew that this disciple was probably asking for his help. Now that this disciple heard that he was not a match for the Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi, he did not mention anything about helping. It was obvious that this disciple was worried about the safety of his teacher. He could not help but nod slightly in his heart. He had not misjudged this disciple. However, how could he just stand by and watch as his disciple was in danger without doing anything? Bai Changchun clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the starry sky. There were some things that he would not tell Yu Qianzhou now. He was afraid that if he told him, this kid would become lazy and rely on him. This was the biggest taboo for a cultivator. This guy had already had enough adventures. It might not be a bad thing to train him more. A beam of light shot over from afar and suddenly stopped not far away. Songyin Xian appeared and looked over in shock. Yu Qianzhou and Xinyu both turned to look. Bai Changchun was still looking at the starry sky with his hands behind his back, unmoved. Songyin Xian recognized the green-robed elder at first glance. It was the legendary person who challenged the Emperor of the Underworld. He looked closely and realized that the elder was only a mid-stage immortal emperor. He relaxed a little and flashed to Qianzhou's side. He cupped his hands at Bai Changchun and said, "You must be the expert who broke into the underworld royal palace, fought the 4 generals of the underworld, and challenged the emperor of the underworld? I am the great minister of the Heartless Palace, Songyun Exine. Greetings." Bai Changchun tilted his head and looked at him. Then, he continued to look at the stars expressionlessly. Songyun Exine's expression was a little awkward. The other party did not seem to care about him at all. Although he was a little unhappy, a person's reputation was like the shadow of a tree. The other party could fight the 4 generals of the underworld alone, escape from the hands of the emperor of the underworld, and play around with the little god Old Man Meng. He admitted that he did not have the ability to do so, so he had to endure it. Yu Qianzhou, who was a little dispirited, immediately became energetic when he saw this. He rubbed his hands and smiled as he introduced Songyun Exine. "Old Song. To tell you the truth, this is my master. This is also the reason why I insisted on coming here." Chapter 1070. He's your master? Songyun Exine was shocked. He looked at the 2 of them in disbelief and said, "If he's from the human world, then wouldn't you?" Before Yu Qianzhou could say anything, Bai Changchun had already interrupted him with a cold snort. What's the point of someone who's about to die knowing so much? Songyun Exine's pupils suddenly shrank. His right hand was already on the storage bracelet on his left wrist. He stared at Yu Qianzhou and said sternly, "Yu Qianzhou, what's the meaning of this?" "He. That." Yu Qianzhou looked at Bai Changchun with an embarrassed smile. He did not know if Bai Changchun had the confidence to kill Songyun Exine. After all, he had personally witnessed Songyun Exine's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. It was simply too powerful. Bai Changchun slowly turned around and glanced at Yu Qianzhou. He said, "You killed his grandson. There's already a death grudge between you and him. Leaving him alive will be a disaster. The master will help you get rid of this disaster today." How embarrassing! Yu Qianzhou rubbed his hands together in embarrassment. He did not expect the old man's temper to be so straightforward. He had not even asked for help, and the old man was already going to make a move. Songyun Exine immediately felt a great sense of danger. In a situation where he had no confidence in defeating his opponent, he knew that he could not stay here for long. Just as he was about to quickly escape, he suddenly felt a huge pressure pressing down on him from all directions. His expression immediately changed. "Hi." Songyun Exine exhaled. His steps were as heavy as a mountain. Each step left a deep footprint on the ground. Dong, dong, dong. The ground shook as he retreated with great difficulty. The closer he got to the other party, the more dangerous it felt. He had thought that it would not be easy for the other party to suppress him. However, when he saw the other party standing with his hands behind his back, he immediately panicked. The other party really did have the strength to kill him easily. He immediately spat angrily. "Bai Changchun, I have no grievances with you. Don't go too far. Let me see your 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style." Bai Changchun's gaze fell on his hands that were about to pull out the sword, and he gave an irrelevant answer. "Don't think about luck. If you don't pull out your sword now, you won't have another chance. Pull out your sword." At this point, Yu Qianzhou, who was behind Bai Changchun, dodged to the side of the cliff with Xinyu. He was prepared to leave if anything went wrong. Songyun Exine knew that there was no turning back now, so he shouted in shock and anger, sword drawing style. With a wave of his hand, a dazzling bright light instantly shot out from his sleeve. The light instantly illuminated the world, and the startling light effortlessly broke through the huge pressure around him. Like a delicate heavenly dragon, the incomparably domineering light swept out with a whistling sound, as if it wanted to break the world apart, almost at the same time. The green robe that was about to be engulfed by the shocking light seemed to be blown by a breeze. As it swayed, the brilliance of the stars and the moon in the night sky seemed to freeze, like a huge disk blocking in front of the skinny body. Xinyu, who was about to flash into the boundary barrier, and Yu Qianzhou, who was about to flash into Utopia, were stunned at the same time. This was because they had both seen the domineering power of Songyun Xian's 3 swords in one sword-drawing style. It was a powerful force that felt unstoppable. However, at this moment, the dazzling light was blocked by the huge void disk that was like a tall mountain. The surrounding air seemed to have been sucked out by the huge disk in an instant. The two of them even felt that the breath in their lungs was forcefully sucked out by the disk, making them almost suffocate. The void disk stood between heaven and earth. It was abnormally grand and huge, and it rippled with a mysterious luster. It blocked the shocking light that seemed to be able to split the world apart. The two of them originally thought that there would be an earth-shattering sound when they collided, but the combination of hardness and softness resulted in silence. Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back, raised one hand and stroked his beard. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, and his hand slid out from under his beard. He stretched out his hand toward the huge disk in front of him. The indomitable disk was immediately pushed forward by 3 feet and began to rotate slowly. It seemed to be rotating with great difficulty under the immense pressure. Humph! Bai Changchun suddenly let out a cold snort that sounded like a vajra subduing a demon. He raised his hand in a very natural manner and drew 2 fingers towards the sky towards the huge disk that was rotating with difficulty. A ray of light zigzagged across the huge disk, as if it was going to split the huge disk into 2 from the center. Immediately, light and shadow intertwined on the huge disk. In the blink of an eye, half of it turned white and the other half black, turning into 2 yin and yang fish chasing each other head to tail. The entire disk immediately rotated faster, stirring up the shocking light that was pressing against the huge disk. Although this exchange of blows seemed slow, it was actually completed in the time of a single breath. Tai Chi. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He stared at the yin and yang fish that were chasing each other. The huge disk was exactly the same as the Tai Chi diagram he saw in his previous life, and it was displaying the mysterious power of the Tai Chi diagram. Shinyu's mouth formed a circle, and his eyes widened. He never dreamed that Great Cloud Xian's 3-in-1 sword-drawing style would be blocked so silently. That was the 3-in-1 sword-drawing style of the Heartless Palace that instantly destroyed half of Twilight City. However, what surprised him even more was yet to come. Return. Bai Changchun let out a sonorous chant. As his green robe fluttered, he pressed one of his palms towards the huge disk. The indomitable Tai Chi disk shrank rapidly, and the fierce light that followed it seemed to become a part of the Tai Chi disk, shrinking rapidly as well. In the blink of an eye, the shrunken Tai Chi disk merged with the shocking light and became the size of a wash basin. It absorbed and rotated in by Changchun's outstretched palm. Although the originally dazzling light had shrunk, it had become gentle. It was like a lantern covered with gauze, illuminating Bai Changchun's green robe particularly clearly. However, everyone could sense that the condensed ball of light in his palm was filled with a terrifying power that made one's heart palpitate. Is this the famous 3-in-1 sword-drawing style of the Heartless Palace? As his green robe fluttered slightly, Bai Changchun clenched one hand behind his back and used the other to absorb the light ball. He said coldly, "That's all there is to it." How is this possible? Great Cloud Xian's expression changed drastically in shock. He thought that the other party would use his powerful cultivation or treasures to forcefully break his sword-drawing style, but he never expected that someone would be able to silently and gently absorb the power of his sword-drawing style with just a wave of his hand. How could the great power that had already been released be absorbed by someone else again? It was so easily caught in his hand. He could actually catch the energy released by someone else with his bare hands. This was a great amount of released energy. It wasn't a physical object, so how is this possible? Great Cloud Xian's face instantly turned pale. Only then did he know that the other party's strength far surpassed his, and he was no match for him at all. Fortunately, the great pressure that restricted his movements had already been broken by his sword-drawing style. Any thoughts of resistance that Great Cloud Xian had instantly vanished.
Go.
The faster the better, the further the better. Great Cloud Xian fled in a flash. However, before he could move, Bai Changchun seemed to have already predicted what he would do. He said calmly, I said that you're someone who's about to die. Do you still want to run? The ball of light in his palm suddenly stopped spinning. With this stop, the ball of light immediately showed signs of expanding and exploding. Bai Changchun's palm pierced through the expanding ball of light at an extremely fast speed. As it moved in and out, his 5 fingers drew dreamy trajectories. Almost instantly, countless dazzling light beams shot out from the ball of light like a violent storm. They shot out densely like a net, and the sharp sound of them tearing through the air rang out incessantly. Lost immortal finger. Yu Qianqiu mumbled with his mouth agape. This was the 3rd time he had seen his master use the lost immortal finger. He had never seen anyone survive this move. In reality, Grey Cloud Xian had already teleported and disappeared from where he was. However, his miserable cries could be heard from the void where the countless dazzling light beams shot out. The moment he appeared in the air, he was already riddled with holes by the countless dazzling light beams, and he was devoured in the blink of an eye. Following his miserable cries, his figure could no longer be seen. All that could be seen was a dense meteor shower shooting into the starry night sky. After the energy of the expanding ball of light was vented, Bai Changchun pulled out his palm and pressed down on it. The ball of light was sucked back into his palm and started spinning again. However, its size had shrunk by half. Xin Yu and Yu Qianqiu, who were still standing dumbfounded at the edge of the cliff, suddenly saw Bai Changchun flick his sleeve. The ball of light flew over their heads with a whoosh and entered the barrier of heavens behind them. The 2 silly birds turned around dumbfoundedly with their mouths wide open. They saw the ball of light distort the moment it entered the barrier of heavens. It was quickly torn apart by an invisible energy and silently disappeared without a trace. Such a powerful energy disappeared just like that. The 2 of them slowly turned around at the same time and looked at each other. They felt their throats go dry, and they didn't know what to say. Finally, they looked in the direction that Grey Cloud Xian had escaped in. The scene of him being riddled with holes still appeared in their minds. Grey Cloud Xian's miserable cries seemed to still echo in their ears. Grey Cloud Xian, who was a middle-stage immortal emperor, was killed just like that? The 2 of them stole another glance at each other, as if they couldn't accept this reality. Xin Yu's expression was a little ugly. He didn't dare to look straight at Bai Changchun. Worry and hesitation appeared in his eyes. He didn't know if it would be his turn next. Even Grey Cloud Xian was killed so easily. He didn't think he had any chance of escaping. Old song. I'm sorry, I didn't expect him to make a move so quickly. I didn't even have the chance to say goodbye to you. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his gaze from the sky and thought of the huge Tai Chi diagram from before. He flashed to Bai Changchun's side and asked with an embarrassed smile, "You really broadened my horizons just now. May I know the name of Master's move?" "I don't know. It doesn't have a name yet." The skinny figure shrouded in the green robe turned around. Bai Changchun put his hands behind his back again as if nothing had happened. He looked up at the darkness on the other side of the cliff and said, "This is a new power manipulation method that I comprehended in the barrier of heavens. One movement is divided into yin and yang. It's mysterious and profound. I still need to continue to comprehend and perfect it." Chapter 1071. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. He felt that this old man was indeed too abnormal. He could easily comprehend some kind of cultivation method. How could others who cultivated the same way as him endure it, especially him, his disciple? The theory of Tai Chi Yin and Yang seemed to have a complete system to follow in his previous life. Unfortunately, he was not an all-rounder who knew everything about astronomy and geography. He did not know much about this mysterious thing. Otherwise, he could really make up a few things to make the old man look at him differently. "Is there anything else?" Bai Changchun suddenly looked at him and asked lightly. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He heard a hint of "don't disturb me if there's nothing else" from his master's words. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he still bowed and said, "Seeing that master is fine, disciple is relieved." Disciple still has some things to deal with, so I won't disturb Master. Bai Changchun nodded expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu bowed again and left. Then he slowly took a few steps back and flashed to Xinyu's side. He tilted his head and stole a glance at his master. He saw that Bai Changchun was still standing with his hands behind his back, looking up at the starry sky. His green robe fluttered in the night wind. Xinyu looked at Yu Qianqiu with a panicked expression. He did not know what he wanted to do. Yu Qianqiu looked at him with a smile and said, "Don't be nervous. I always keep my word. I promise to help you remove the restriction in your body, so naturally I will do it. Relax your body." Xinyu was surprised and happy when he heard this. He looked at him in disbelief. He did not know if what he said was true or not. After all, he had not sent him out as promised. However, it was not up to him whether he believed it or not. He could only do as he was told and relax his body nervously. "Open your mouth." Yu Qianqiu let out a low growl, his 5 fingers grabbing towards Xinyu's mouth. Xinyu immediately felt the bead in his body rushing towards his throat. He quickly opened his mouth, and a green light shot out. Yu Qianqiu's hand grabbed, and his fist was hidden in his sleeve. Xinyu was overjoyed. He touched his chest and confirmed that the thing in his body had been removed. The stone in his heart immediately fell to the ground. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and didn't know what to say. After a while, he said incoherently, "I will definitely keep my promise and send you out. No need. I have my own way to leave, but I want you to promise me something else." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the all-heavens boundary outside the cliff. "Every year on this day, you have to wait for me at the river Styx at the border between the endless horizon and here for a day. If I still don't come after a day, you have to come back. How about that?" Then he looked at Bai Changchun. Xinyu also peeked at Bai Changchun. Although the restriction in his body had been removed, he had no choice but to agree. His master could enter and exit the all-heavens boundary at will. He had completely lost his defensive advantage. The consequences of not agreeing could be imagined. He nodded awkwardly. "I understand. Every year on this day, I will wait for you at the river Styx at the border between the endless horizon and here for a day." A smile bloomed on Yu Qianqiu's face. "Xinyu, don't blame me for using you. You have to know that you provoked me first. Furthermore, if it wasn't for my help, who knows when you would be able to return here. So we are even now. You can go. Go back to the home you have been away from for 150,000 years. I'm glad to have met you in the netherworld this time. We will meet again if fate allows. I should go back now. Goodbye." Then he smiled and cupped his fists at Xinyu. Then he turned around and bowed to Bai Changchun, who was standing under the moonlight with his hands behind his back. Just as Xinyu cupped his fists to return the greeting, he realized that Yu Qianqiu had disappeared without a trace. There was no fluctuation in the air around him. He had no idea where Yu Qianqiu had gone. Did he really leave? Xinyu was stunned. Then he became a little excited. With Yu Qianqiu's departure and the words he said before he left, the resentment that had accumulated in his heart disappeared instantly. Thinking about it carefully, Yu Qianqiu did not owe him anything. He even brought him back to the home that he had been away from for 150,000 years. Seriously speaking, he should be thanking him. Xinyu took a deep breath. The shackles that had been on him all these years had finally been removed. He could be free again. His gaze fell on the skinny old man in a green robe. He bowed respectfully to Yao Yao in silence. Then, he turned into a stream of light and flew away without any worries or fear. After he disappeared into the distance, Bai Changchun, who was standing with his hands behind his back and looking at the stars, suddenly looked outside the celestial boundary. His eyes flickered, and he snorted coldly. "How dare you treat my disciple as a performer and sing for you? How majestic of an emperor! Just change the wedding ceremony to a funeral ceremony." As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and turned into a stream of light that flew away quickly. He was heading in the direction of Old Meng. The sun was shining brightly in Utopia. Weeds and wildflowers clustered beside the gurgling stream. On a small mountain surrounded by the stream, Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to block the glaring sunlight. After staying in the dark netherworld for a long time, he really could not adapt to the sunlight. After a while, he put down his hand and looked around at the lush greenery at the foot of the mountain. It was so good to take a breath of fresh air. He could not help but sigh. Humans and ghosts are indeed different. People should stay where they are. After saying that, he closed his eyes again. After a moment of silence, he slowly shook his head and opened his eyes. He found that he had indeed completely lost contact with the tomb of the god of sin. Not only could he not find Bai Changchun, but the silver ball that he had thrown inside did not respond at all. He did not know what trick there was in the tomb of the god of sin to be able to isolate the outside world. It was impossible to enter and exit the tomb of the god of sin at any time. Fortunately, he had made preparations in advance. He made an agreement with Shen Yu once a year, so he had the opportunity to enter and exit the tomb of the god of sin. It was unknown what he thought of, but after shaking his head, he disappeared again. The sky was high, and the sky was wide. At the peak of the love mound that suddenly emerged from the sea of clouds, Mei He, whose clothes were fluttering in the wind, held both of his hands with a gloomy expression. There was a broken nameplate in his hands. The owner of this nameplate was Grey Cloud Exion. The breaking of the nameplate meant that the owner had died. Opposite him was the tall and thin Wang Qing. His wide blue robe was fluttering in the wind, and his long hair, which was not tied up, fluttered behind him. The eyes in the two holes of the silver mask were cold. He stared motionlessly at the nameplate in Mei He's hands. No one could see what expression he had on his face. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound not far away. Mei He felt that the wind that swept back and forth on the mountain peak had solidified. He turned his head and saw that the six-dragon snow blue, which was originally restrained, was now overflowing with light. The huge sword that was half inserted into the mountain peak was slowly being pulled out by itself. Mei He could feel the anger of his honored master. Thinking about it, the only one in the Heartless Palace who could use the 3-in-1 sword drawing style was the High Priest. The death of the High Priest was indeed a huge loss to the Heartless Palace. With a clang sound, the six-dragon snow blue returned to its original position. The flowing light was restrained again, and the wind swept back and forth on the mountain peak again. Mei He raised his head slightly to look at his honored master, but he saw that his honored master had already turned around. He could only see his honored master's back. He said in an indifferent voice, "I will go down the mountain to attend Jin Tai's wedding ceremony in a few days. Before that, I don't want to be distracted. Release the news that your eldest senior brother has died. Take the opportunity to find out the cause of his death to deceive others. You will personally lead people to the netherworld and take the core forces of the Heartless Palace away in batches." Chapter 1072. Damn it! Why are the ruffians in the immortal world so lousy, still stuck in the ancient times? Yu Qianqiu looked back in the direction of the hallucinatory immortal city, then looked in the direction of the lewd laughter. He couldn't help but pick his nose. Should he go back to do his own things, or fight for justice and eradicate evil? What if he encountered a tough guy and was beaten up by the ruffians? His nose flapped again as he sniffed the fragrance, faintly evoking memories. He remembered the origin of this fragrance. He clenched his teeth and sighed, but he still dodged. Once he landed on the hill, he immediately saw 3 men surrounding a green-clothed little girl. He didn't guess wrong. It was the little girl called Lu Qing, who followed an old man to sell things in the hallucinatory immortal city. Yu Qianqiu sized up the 3 men and found that he couldn't see through their cultivation. Their cultivation was clearly higher than his, and their clothes were also somewhat familiar. They seemed to be disciples of some large sect. He couldn't help but frown. As expected, those who dared to do this kind of thing in the open had a background. The moment he landed, the 3 men below also noticed the movement and looked up. When they saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, their expressions changed slightly. How could it be him? A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. Who didn't know the world commerce's sect master, Yu Qianqiu? Moreover, These three people had seen Yu Qianqiu with their own eyes. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know them, they knew that no matter how strong their background was, this person couldn't be provoked. At least for now, this person was carrying the immortal emperor's decree and could do whatever he wanted. The green-clothed little girl looked up, and her eyes immediately lit up as if she had met her savior. She shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, save me." This girl's memory was really good. I forgot what your name was, but you still remembered my name. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He was too embarrassed to ignore it now. He raised his brows and stared at the three people below with a sneer. The three of you are really in a good mood. This Yu is interested to see what the three of you want to do. Continue. This Yu probably won't disturb you. What do you mean, I probably won't disturb you? The trio's expressions changed again. One of them politely cupped his hands and said, "So it's sect leader Yu. We greet you." The other two hurriedly followed suit and bowed. The man then pointed to the green-clothed girl and said, "We saw her acting suspiciously, and we're just about to question her. Since Sect Master Yu is here, I believe she won't be able to cause any trouble. Let's hand her over to Sect Master Yu to handle." The other two nodded in agreement. They knew how to conduct themselves. They had the taste of letting you taste the soup of this little beauty first. Did he really think that all the men in the world were black? Don't you know what it means to be lecherous? Yu Qianqiu's face darkened immediately. He said in a low voice, "Bullsh**T. If you don't scram, I'll chop off your dog heads." The trio smiled flatteringly and immediately ran away with their tails between their legs. Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them running away. He didn't fly into a rage and chase after them. Let's not talk about whether he could catch up to them or not. The key was that he didn't have the mood to fly into a rage. He reckoned that once he returned, the people from Heartless Palace would ask him why Grey Cloud Xian died. There was also the matter of the Immortal Palace that he had to deal with. How could he be in the mood to cause more trouble? Hearing movement, he turned around cautiously. The green-clothed girl had already flashed to the hillside. Her 10 fingers were rubbing the edge of her skirt as she looked at him from a distance. Her pure eyes were flickering, and it was as if they could speak. There seemed to be anticipation and fear in her eyes. The fragrance became more and more alluring. Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and shook his head with a smile. "Little girl, go home quickly. Don't run out alone in the future." After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. He didn't have the good moral character to send the little girl home. He had already tried his best to help her. After all, the world had become so chaotic. There were too many people who needed help. The weak were prey to the strong. He was in a precarious situation, so he had to deal with it carefully. How could he care too much? However, the little girl's crisp voice came from behind him. She said weakly, "My name is Lu." Yu Qianqiu stopped in his tracks and scratched his forehead speechlessly. He turned around and looked at her in confusion, as if asking what she meant. The green-clothed girl immediately said with anticipation, "Yu Qianqiu. We met in the hallucinatory Immortal City. My grandfather was there too. You even gave me spirit stones." "So what?" Yu Qianqiu scratched his head again. He still didn't understand what the little girl was trying to say. Then, realization dawned on his face. He took out a big handful of divine-grade spirit stones from his storage pouch and walked in front of her. He pulled out her hands that were rubbing the hem of her skirt, then pried open her slender fingers and placed the big handful of divine-grade spirit stones in her fair palms. The little girl's pretty and slightly immature face revealed a blank expression as she looked at him, then at the spirit stones in her hands. She also didn't understand what he was trying to say. After doing all this, Yu Qianqiu turned into a streak of light and shot into the sky, flying in the direction of the hallucinatory Immortal City. However, he immediately felt someone following him. When he turned around, he saw the little girl flying behind him. Why did it feel like she was following him? Could it be that they were going the same way? Yu Qianqiu's brows creased into a frown. His figure flashed and deviated from the direction he was flying in. In the end, The little girl also made a turn in the air and followed him. This time, Yu Qianqiu couldn't take it anymore. His figure stopped, turning around and floating in the air. The little girl blinked her eyes as she stopped in front of him, her hand still holding the pile of spirit stones. Miss Liu, why are you following me? Yu Qianqiu asked in a low voice. Liu had a blank expression on her face, as if she didn't know anything. She raised the spirit stones in her hands and said, "Your things are with me." Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like this little girl was following him because she wanted to return the spirit stones to him. As expected, she was a naive person who didn't understand the ways of the world. It was all his fault for not making things clear. He smiled bitterly and said, "Miss Liu, these spirit stones are for you. There's no need to return them to me." Who knew that Liu's head would shake like a rattle drum, and she said, "My grandfather said that people's hearts are sinister. I can't simply take other people's things." Yu Qianqiu was choked by her words. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he said, "Since you know that people's hearts are sinister, you still dare to run around with me? I'll give you the spirit stones. Quickly go home, and don't follow me anymore. But you're a good person." Liu said very seriously. However, when she heard that the spirit stones were for her, she kept the things in her hands impolitely. These words were really ironic. Why don't I feel like I'm a good person? Yu Qianqiu scratched his nose in embarrassment and sized up the little girl again. He realized that her cultivation was similar to his and couldn't help but grit his teeth. Such a naive little girl with a low cultivation was like a piece of fatty meat wherever she went. He really didn't feel at ease letting her run around alone. He then asked somewhat gloomily, "I say, Liu, where's your house? How can your grandfather feel at ease letting you run around alone?" Liu lowered her head slightly and said, "I also don't know where my house is. I snuck out alone. My grandfather still doesn't know that I ran out. I can't find my way back." After saying that, she looked at Yu Qianqiu with eyes filled with anticipation, as if she was saying, "Take me in." Yu Qianqiu's expression collapsed. How could the World Commerce Association casually take in outsiders? He wanted to immediately harden his heart and leave, but he couldn't win against the other party's clean and clear eyes. After hesitating for a while, he still gave in and asked, "Then what if your grandfather wants to find you, but can't find you?" Hearing the sound of the door opening, the women turned around and were instantly pleasantly surprised. Those who were sitting all stood up. Z even pushed the mahjong tiles away with a crash and exclaimed excitedly, "Big liar, you're back." Chapter 1073. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's smiling face immediately sunk. He came back happily, but he couldn't seem to be happy when he met this woman. She made a fuss in front of everyone and didn't know what it meant to give others face. Yu Qianqiu gave her a dark look and moved to the side, making way for Liu behind him. The little girl looked curiously and timidly at the beautiful sisters in the room. The women looked at each other with complicated expressions. "Wah, I didn't say anything wrong, right?" Z jumped out and turned to face her sisters. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu at the door and shouted, "I said he was going to bring another one back for you." Turning around, she faced Yu Qianqiu with a face full of anger and said, "I didn't think you wouldn't even let off such a young girl. Are you done?" Yu Qianqiu looked at her coldly and snorted, "None of your business. You're shameless," Zi scolded with a flushed face. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with her and nodded at Yanyu. Yanyu walked over and squeezed out a smile, saying, "You're back." Yu Qianqiu pointed at Liu and said, "She's called Liu." On the way back, I happened to see her being bullied by a few men, so I saved her. I saw that she didn't know the ways of the world and was afraid that she would encounter some danger, so I brought her back first. When the time comes, her grandfather will come to find her. You look after her first. Don't let her run around the World Commerce Association." Once these words were said, the women immediately understood. So it was like this. It wasn't what everyone thought at all. The furious Ze immediately became incomparably embarrassed. Her mouth pouted a few times, and she lost her temper. Yu Qianzhou's gaze swept across the few women and coincidentally met with the 100 Charms Beauty's gaze. The 100 Charms Beauty calmly nodded and smiled, while Yu Qianzhou's gaze was somewhat flustered as he avoided it. He waved his hand at the few people and said, "I still have some things to do. You guys help look after her." He pointed at Luer and left like he was escaping. Looking at the silhouette disappearing outside the door, the Allure Beauty's expression became slightly desolate. A trace of desolation flashed to her eyes, but she was immediately awakened by Ze's cheers. Ze was holding the little girl's hand as she clicked her tongue and asked in surprise, "Are you called Lu?" "Oh, liar, did Yu Qianzhou help you deal with those men who bullied you?" The few women didn't know whether to laugh or cry as they looked at Ze. It wouldn't be wrong to say that they were envious of her. They envied her for being heartless. No matter how big the matter was, it was in the past. Next time, she might still go against Yu Qianzhou. Yenyu had been secretly paying attention to the changes in the Allure Beauty's expression.
All right.
Now is not the time to argue about this. De Mingluan raised his hand to stop the two from bickering. He stared at Yu Qianzhou and frowned. "It's good that you're back safely. Do you know that with the Immortal Emperor's wedding approaching, Immortal Empress Ji was asked you about your composing progress multiple times? Everyone in the Immortal Palace is very concerned and has sent me multiple messages. As the leader of the Merchant Association, I have personally gone to the World Merchant Association many times for this matter. Since you're back, quickly prepare to go to the Immortal Palace with me." Damn it. What is this woman Ji Wu trying to do? Is she trying to trick me? Yu Qianzhou cursed in his heart. He was still a little worried that Ji Wu would reveal his background. Although he knew that if she wanted to reveal it, she would have done so long ago. Wei Chuanqiu glanced at him and asked De Mingluan worriedly, "Will something happen to him if we really let him go to the Immortal Palace?" Yu Qianzhou nodded in agreement. "Isn't there still a few days? Isn't it too early to go now?" De Mingluan sneered. "What kind of occasion do you think the Immortal Emperor's wedding is? All the sect masters in the immortal world will be there to congratulate him. If you come up with something that can't be shown in public, will they let you perform in public? There's naturally a reason for you to go earlier." As he spoke, he looked at Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu's faces and finally at Yu Qianzhou's face. He said slowly, "So, you better think carefully. If you really don't have the confidence, you might as well say it now." Wei Chuanqiu's eyebrows twitched as she vaguely sensed something. She asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" De Mingluan stared at Yu Qianzhou and said in a deep voice, "You said you have the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. Is this true?" Yu Qianzhou looked at the three and thought that there was no need to hide it. He nodded. "It is true. What does this have to do with the token of the Emperor of the Underworld?" De Mingluan's eyes lit up. "Of course it has something to do with it. As far as I know, the token of the Emperor of the Underworld will not easily appear in the hands of unrelated people. It must be given to someone who is deeply trusted by the Emperor of the Underworld. If you really don't have the confidence for this wedding, we still have a chance to save our lives. That is, we will all hide in the Underworld while we still have some time. With the protection of the Emperor of the Underworld, Jin Tai will not be able to do anything to us in the Underworld. The Emperor of the Underworld will not let Jin Tai do anything to us even if it is for his own sake." "Us?" Yu Qianzhou was surprised. "You also want to escape with us?" "Of course." De Mingluan was angry, pointing and scolding. "What does your song have to do with me? You just have to make one request after another to the Celestial Palace." Even if he wanted to escape, there was no need for him to take the risk of escaping to the Netherworld. "Then what do you want to do?" De Mingluan asked. Yu Qianzhou looked into the distance and said with determination, "Isn't it just going to the Celestial Palace? There was nothing to be afraid of. If it really doesn't work, we can just run together. I've already prepared an escape route for everyone. No one can do anything to us. After his experience in the all-heavens boundary, in terms of mentality, the Celestial Palace could no longer give him too much pressure. When they heard this, they looked at each other. They didn't know whether it was true or not. De Mingluan narrowed his eyes and looked at him for a while, then said in a deep voice, "In that case, I have nothing to say. I'll go back and give some instructions. I'll look for you later." With that, he flew away. De Mingluan went to make preparations. Yu Qianqiu, who had just returned and had to rush to the Celestial Palace, naturally had to make some preparations. After having a secret discussion with Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Prung on the rooftop, he quickly went downstairs and hid in a room. He took out the token of authority of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and the token of passage to the underworld that the great Ming Luan had given him. He held one in each hand and waited for a while. Because the token of authority of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance was too obvious, he put it away. As for the Netherworld Passage token, he didn't stand on ceremony. It might be difficult for others to imitate, but it wasn't difficult for him at all. He used Jinju to make dozens of tokens in one go as templates so that he could imitate it when needed. After doing this, he quickly gathered the lords of the various countries to meet in the conference room on the 21st floor. In the end, he found that everyone couldn't resist the temptation in the end. They used elixirs and the Immortal Ascension Passage to forcibly raise their cultivation to the early stage of Small Immortal. In this regard, Yu Qianqiu expressed his understanding, because a small number of them had already reached the end of their lifespans. Since they couldn't be sure that they would succeed naturally, they could only take a shortcut. When the others saw the cultivation of the people around them skyrocketing, they couldn't remain indifferent. They gritted their teeth and followed suit. After everyone communicated, Yu Qianqiu carefully observed everyone's mental state. He was afraid that everyone would lose control of their emotions if they were cooped up here for too long. Some people would want to leave or go back. However, he didn't find anything out of the ordinary. After thinking about it carefully, he felt relieved. Think about it, a mere few years was really nothing to cultivators. Moreover, the illusory immortal city had cultivation resources that everyone couldn't compare to in the mortal world. As long as it was something that everyone needed for cultivation, the World Chamber of Commerce had never been stingy with everyone. What Yu Qianqiu didn't know, and most importantly, was that the longer everyone stayed in the illusory immortal city, the more they understood how dangerous the outside world was, and the more they understood how tiny they were. Even though they were overlords of an area in the mortal world, in the immortal dimension that was filled with sects like trees in a forest, any ordinary expert from any sect would be able to easily deal with them. With their cultivations, it was impossible for them to stand out in the immortal dimension. Therefore, whether it was in terms of cultivation resources or safety, having the World Chamber of Commerce protect them in the illusory immortal city was really the best. Whether it was the barrenness of the mortal world or the dangers of the outside world, they temporarily didn't consider it. Currently, they had Yu Qianqiu, who could provide them with resources. If they didn't make good use of it, they wouldn't be the rulers of the various countries they used to be. When he returned to the rooftop, the great bright wheel was already waiting for him. Yu Qianqiu smiled as he took out the token of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and the token of passage to the underworld. When the great bright wheel received it, it was silent for a moment before it said, "It seems that these things didn't help you much in the underworld, because the token of the underworld emperor is more useful than them." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu, who were at the side, seemed to be sending him off. Wei Chuanqiu looked around and didn't see any movement from the women. She asked thoughtfully, "You're not sure if you'll be lucky or not. Aren't you going to say goodbye to them before you leave?" "I've been wandering outside all year round and haven't had time to accompany them. I've already let them down. I'd rather have them complain about me and think that I'm a womanizer than have them worry about me. I can only hope that I can create a future for them with no regrets." Yu Qianqiu shook his head with a wry smile before summoning a flying shuttle and taking the lead to fly into it. The great bright wheel followed closely behind. A stream of light flew far away from the rooftop of the World Chamber of Commerce. It blended into the streams of light that rose and fell in the illusory immortal city and disappeared. The disciples of the various sects who had been secretly watching the World Chamber of Commerce also quietly disappeared. On a day when the sky was filled with rosy clouds, Yu Qianzhou flew towards the main peak of the blissful immortal realm for the first time. There was a majestic palace shining brightly amidst the misty clouds. The two landed in a world made of gold. Relying on a token that shone with golden light, the great bright will brought him into the righteous heaven gate, which was guarded by two golden-robed guards. Yu Qianzhou followed behind the great bright wheel and stared dumbfoundedly at the incomparably wide and majestic golden plaza in front of him. The ground was paved with large golden tiles. There were golden pillars, golden towers, golden arched bridges, golden railings, and other things at regular intervals. In addition to the majestic palace that shone with golden light in the distance, this was clearly a golden kingdom, a golden world. Walking in this golden world, the ground was like a glossy yellow mirror that could clearly reflect the people walking on it. Each golden pillar that brushed past was several times thicker than a person, and each golden tile on the ground was several times wider than a bed. Looking around in such a grand atmosphere, it made one feel so insignificant, like an ant climbing on a mountain of gold. This was Jin Tai's immortal palace. Yu Qianzhou was inwardly speechless. If he didn't know that Jin Tai was a gold spirit, just the aura of the immortal palace in front of him would have frightened him. The two walked for more than an hour before arriving at the bottom of a golden flight of steps that increased in height by 100 meters. At the top of the flight of steps was the huge immortal palace that shone with golden light. It made one look up at the mountain and added a sense of oppression. On both sides of the flight of steps, there were halberd-wielding guards at regular intervals. The strict atmosphere was used to guide people. The great bright will suddenly raised its hand, and the two stopped at the bottom of the flight of steps. On the way here, the great bright will had told Yu Qianzhou that normal people were not allowed to use spells to fly within the immortal palace. They could only walk. Yu Qianzhou looked at the flight of steps and was speechless. What kind of rule was this? They had already walked for more than half an hour. Adding on the flight of steps that were hundreds of meters high, wouldn't it be a waste of other people's time? Just as he was thinking, he saw a person who violated the rules. Instead of walking, she directly flashed down from the flight of steps and landed on the lowest step in front of the two of them. The person who came was wearing a golden robe. Not only did she look old, she was actually an old lady with wrinkled skin and white hair. Her eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as she looked at Yu Qianzhou, causing Yu Qianzhou's heart to jump. Someone who could brazenly violate the rules of the immortal palace was naturally not an ordinary person. Yu Qianzhou was muttering the identity of the person who came. The great bright will had already secretly warned him. This person is the chief steward of the immortal palace. Her name is Nia Shaoqian. Her son is the commander of internal affairs, He Lai, who controls the immortal palace guards. Both mother and son have high cultivation and can be said to be the two people the immortal emperor trusts the most. After saying this secretly, the great bright will quickly cupped his hands and bowed to the person who came. Greetings, Chief Steward Nia. Nia Shaoqian? Her name is Nia Shaoqian? Why isn't her son surnamed Ning? The corner of Yu Qianzhou's mouth couldn't help but twitch. He was quite shocked. This chief steward Nia ignored the great bright wheel and stared at Yu Qianzhou. She asked indifferently, "You are Yu Qianzhou?" Yu Qianzhou hurriedly bowed and said, "Yu Qianzhou greets Chief Steward Nia." Chapter 1075. Nia Shaoqian looked at him for a while and asked, "Are you ready?" This baffling question made Yu Qianzhou stare blankly. After being secretly pointed out by the great bright wheel, he finally understood that Yi Zichen was asking if he had prepared the song for his gift. Immediately, he modestly replied, "I have prepared it, but I am afraid that I cannot present it." Nia Shaoqian didn't ask any more questions. She crushed a jade talisman, and after a while, a beam of light flew over from afar. A middle-aged woman wearing a green veil landed on the ground and walked up to the two. She cupped her hands and said, "Greetings, manager." Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and couldn't help but be curious. After entering the paradise of bliss, everyone he saw was wearing a golden robe. He didn't expect to see a woman dressed in a different style in the immortal palace. He secretly transmitted his voice to the great bright wheel. "Who is this woman?" The great bright wheel, who was standing to the side, replied, "Her name is Qingyang. She is the one who choreographed the dance for the immortal emperor. Because she often dances, she is probably the only person in the immortal palace who doesn't need to wear a golden robe like us." Qingyang. This person is Yu Qianqiu. This is related to the immortal emperor's wedding, so you better help him. Otherwise, he will become the laughing stock of the world. General Manager Nie Xiaoqian pouted at Yu Qianqiu. "Right here?" Qingyang coldly looked around. Her words and actions were not as respectful as the great bright wheel to Nie Xiaoqian. Nie Xiaoqian frowned and said, "The song for the immortal emperor's wedding can only be released to the public on the day of the wedding. Not to mention, his unorthodox song still needs your arrangement. Let's go to your Green Pear Palace to have a look. If he really can't be shown in public, I'll explain to immortal Empress Wu Ji." Qingyang didn't say anything. She turned around and flew away like a streak of light. Chief Steward Nie swept a glance at the remaining two and said, "Let's go to Green Pear Palace together." She also transformed into a stream of light and flashed away. The great bright wheel immediately flew after her. At the bottom of the stairs, Yu Qianqiu was at a loss. He then jogged in the direction that they flew in. After running for a short distance, a ray of light shot back. De Ming had returned and was floating in the air. He stared down at the ground and asked angrily, "Yu Qianqiu, why are you running here? Damn it! Didn't you say that ordinary people aren't allowed to fly here?" The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face was even more furious than his. Seeing that others could fly while he could only run, it would be strange if he could be happy. De Mingluan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If the head chief says it's okay, then it's okay. What did she say that it was okay? If you don't make things clear, would I dare to take the risk? Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth. He was too lazy to argue with De Mingluan. He waved his hand and interrupted. "Stop talking nonsense. This isn't a place for you to behave atrociously. Quickly follow me. Don't let the head chief wait for too long." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu relaxed. Thus, the two of them quickly flew away from this place. After flying out of the golden world, the two of them headed straight for a mountain peak not far away. On the peak of the mountain, there was a huge ancient palace made of pure wood. On the small square outside the palace, Qingyang, who looked indistinct and serious, glanced at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Come with me." Yu Qianqiu cautiously glanced at the great bright wheel. When he saw the great bright wheel nod, he quickly followed behind Qingyang. De Mingluan followed behind head chief steward Nie, who knew that Qingyang, who was at the front, would suddenly turn around and say, "The two of you, don't follow us. Especially you, head chief steward. The atmosphere of my Green Pear Palace doesn't match your arrogant manner." After she finished speaking, she turned around and continued to walk into the palace. Following behind her, Yu Qianqiu secretly clicked his tongue. He didn't know what kind of background this woman had. She actually dared to speak to the Golden Emperor's trusted aide, the head chief steward Nie, in such a tone. Stopping, head chief steward Nie had a helpless expression. He turned around to look at De Mingluan and smiled wryly. "My daughter really doesn't give me any face." Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the palace, pricked up his ears. De Mingluan watched as Yu Qianqiu disappeared into the palace. After a moment of silence, she bluntly said, "Head chief steward, forgive me for speaking bluntly. Our loyalty to the immortal emperor cannot be forced onto the next generation." Once these treasonous words came out, head chief steward Nie's body shook. Her sharp gaze pierced straight into De Mingluan's calm eyes. A murderous aura lingered around her body. After a long time, she slowly retracted it back into her body. She slightly sighed and said, Perhaps what you said is right. However, this is the only time. I don't want to hear you say such words in my ears again." Then her tone changed and she coldly said, "I can see that you are very considerate of this Yu Qianqiu. Head chief steward is wise. I have always been loyal to the immortal emperor. The sun and moon can bear witness." De Mingluan slightly bowed towards her. Then, she helplessly said, "I won't hide it from head chief steward. I actually don't have much of a relationship with this Yu Qianqiu. The reason why I take care of him is because we were friends in the past. As long as it doesn't harm the immortal palace's interests, please help me a little." Head chief steward Nie's gaze that was full of deep meaning moved away from him. She didn't pursue the matter any further. Instead, she looked at the palace gate of the Green Pear Palace with a sense of loss. Everyone had their own story. Even though she was a high-ranking official, she was no exception. The people outside could not hear any sound from inside the Green Pear Palace. It was clear that there was a soundproof formation inside. About an hour later, Qingyang's figure flashed out from the palace gate. De Mingluan didn't see Yu Qianqiu. Her eyes couldn't help but slightly narrow as she stared at Qingyang. "How is it? Is this Yu Qianqiu's item presentable?" Head chief steward Nie helplessly asked. Qingyang's expression was cold. She didn't directly comment on whether Yu Qianqiu's item was good or bad. She only replied without a smile, "Help him make some arrangements. When the time comes, it should be able to satisfy the immortal emperor and immortal empress." Hearing these words, De Mingluan's anxious heart finally relaxed. He knew that since this woman said these words, Yu Qianqiu should be able to pass this hurdle. Head chief steward Nie also slightly nodded his head. "Then I'll leave this Yu Qianqiu to you. You must bring out something satisfactory on the day of the wedding." "I have a request," Qingyang coldly said. "I need enough people to accompany the dancers. I also need to create enough instrumental music." The wrinkled chief steward Nie didn't hesitate to say, "This is not a problem. I will contact the people in charge of manpower and skilled craftsmen. They will do their best to cooperate with you." After receiving the reply, Qingyang didn't say any polite words of thanks. Instead, she turned around with a cold expression and was about to leave. At this time, a golden-robed guard quickly rushed over and bowed to Chief Steward Nie. Reporting to Chief Steward, "The immortal empress heard that Yu Qianqiu is here and wants to see Yu Qianqiu." Everyone present was startled when they heard this, especially Qingyang. She stopped in her tracks and turned back around, frowning as she looked at Chief Steward Nie. The latter seemed to know that she didn't like people to disturb her work. However, no matter what, Ji Wu was now carrying the title of the Immortal Empress. As long as it wasn't an unreasonable request, it wouldn't be easy to refuse. With a straight face, he said, "Since the Immortal Empress wants to see him, Qingyang, quickly tell Yu Qianqiu to come out and see the Immortal Empress at the Crystal Palace." Qingyang coldly replied, "Yes." Her figure flickered as she returned to the palace. Not long after, Yu Qianqiu ran out with a puzzled look on his face. He looked at the great bright wheel with a questioning gaze. It seemed that Qingyang hadn't told him anything. Seeing the confusion on his face, Chief Steward Nie pointed at the guard who came to report and said indifferently, "Yu Qianqiu, Immortal Empress Ji Wu wants to see you. Go with her to see her." After that, quickly return to the Green Pear Palace and continue to listen to her orders. "Do you understand?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. Why did that woman Ji want to see him now? Confused, he cupped his fists and replied yes. Then, he flew away with the guard. The great bright wheel's eyes also flickered. He didn't know whether it was a good or bad thing for Ji Wu to summon Yu Qianqiu. He frowned and cupped his fists. "Chief Steward, if there is nothing else, I will return to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance." Chief Steward Nie nodded and left first. The great bright wheel looked in the direction of the Crystal Palace in the distance, then frowned and turned into a stream of light and flew away. Outside a gate with a tall jade wall, Yu Qianqiu immediately saw the colorful jade palace inside. The guard stopped outside the gate and stretched his hand inside. Don't let the immortal empress wait for too long. Quickly go and see her. Thank you. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and walked in without any clues on his face. In fact, his mind was spinning quickly. He didn't know if Lu Yanqing and Immortal Crocodile Monarch were here. As soon as he stepped into the palace, he was immediately attracted by a thatched hut not far away. He didn't understand why there was such a strange thatched hut in this place that looked like a crystal palace. The courtyard was empty and desolate, and not a single person could be seen. Just as Yu Qianqiu was wondering why the dignified immortal queen's residence did not have a servant, he saw a familiar person walking out of the palace door in front of him.
It was none other than Lu Yanqing.
Lu Yanqing looked at him with a complicated expression and was stunned for a moment. Then she bowed and led the way into the hall. The immortal empress is waiting for you inside. Although there was a smile on Yu Qianqiu's face, there was an unconcealable coldness in his eyes. It was hard for him to have a good impression of this woman who made decisions on her own and made him uncomfortable. When he walked along the jade steps to the door of the hall, he smiled with a slightly sarcastic smile and cupped his fists. Thank you. When Lu Yanqing saw the unforgettable coldness in his eyes, her face couldn't help but turn pale. Her delicate body swayed for a moment, and she turned back and stepped into the hall with her head slightly lowered. After Yu Qianqiu followed her in, he found that the hall was empty. He didn't understand what it meant. He saw Lu Yanqing, who was leading the way, turn into the back hall. He paused for a moment, but finally followed her. Who knew that as soon as he stepped into the rear hall, a large hand would grab the collar behind his neck like a sneak attack. Yu Qianqiu was shocked and quickly dodged while turning his head to look, only to see a black-clothed, silver-haired big man laughing loudly at him. Stinking brat. We finally meet again. Old monster. Yu Qianqiu was pleasantly surprised. Who else could this person be but the immortal crocodile monarch that he had been talking about? Before he landed, he flashed back into the air. The two fellows who had not seen each other for a long time couldn't help but hug each other. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.